1 Thessalonians 4:3. Faith got me some kind of tea from Target. Tastes like I'm drinking Christmas. That to say, it tastes like a pine tree that's been coated in cinnamon. Man. So then I put more vanilla in it to try to drown it out. And that's like a chemical reaction, kind of like how you can't mix cleaning stuff together. It makes noxious chlorine gas. I think that's what has happened with this cinnamon and vanilla. 1 Thessalonians 4:3. For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that is, that you abstain from sexual immorality. This is the big one. I wish it stopped at this is God's will, your sanctification, but it doesn't. It keeps going. It elaborates. That is, oh boy, that means your sanctification is that you abstain from sexual immorality. So it just had to take it that step farther so that I have to be uncomfortable. In ancient Greece and in ancient Rome, promiscuity was absolutely rampant. And look into your Old Testament for cultures even older than that, and you find promiscuity all throughout the Bible. You find Lot's daughters that decide, oh man, we need to have our family keep going. We should probably get our dad drunk. You find Judah, who, whenever he travels away from home, the first thing he does is look for a prostitute. It's not, this isn't a sin that started in Greece and then to Rome. This is something that's been since the beginning. But in the ancient world, religion was tied closely to societal structure. So it's not really until what we call the Enlightenment that religion and society were kind of pulled apart. You look at your nations in the Old Testament, and their state is closely tied to their religion. My God is better than your God, so I'm going to conquer you. Well, the fact is that the local temple was not just a religious place, but it was also a local place where people would meet. Whenever we built up America, we had these things called town squares, and it tended to be around what? The courthouse and the church. Because that's where people would be, that's where people would meet, and then those town squares would get other shops around them because that's where people were. Well, the Jewish temple and the synagogues were the same way. The synagogues are where people would congregate, people would meet. The temple in Jerusalem was the same way, and that's one reason why Paul always started his evangelism there. That's where the people are. Well, the thing is that the good thing about a society and religion being intertwined is that when the religion is good and moral, then society at large tends to lean more toward goodness and morality. We find that in the church of the Middle Ages. Through all of its faults, which are plenty, you have movements like the monastic order of men saying, we want to do good. We want to do the will of God. And from that births higher education. That's where the college system comes from. That's why we have so many manuscripts with the amanuensis and the scribes coming from the monastic order. And it started from people that wanted to be good and moral. And a lot of monks would even try to escape to the monastery because of their sexual lusts. Augustine was one of those that he just couldn't conquer his sexual lust. So he said, I've got to remove myself from it. Now, the bad thing, though, about religion and a society being tied together is that when a religion has tenets that lean towards debauchery and violence, society tends to acquire those features as well. So a big example of this would be the Vikings with their warrior gods. Their gods are warriors. They have to be warriors because to gain Valhalla, their version of heaven, you have to die in battle fighting. And so if there's no war, you have to find a war. And that's exactly what they would do. I found it interesting. I read just the other day that they have found Indian, and by Indian I mean American Indian, Native American, they have found Native American DNA in Scandinavian countries. Why would that be? Because Vikings would have come to America, taken women home with them, fought wars, taken women with them, because their gods decree it. Rome fits into this mold. This exact mold where their religion and their state are tied very, very close together. Remember, separation of church and state is a new invention. And what they did is they had great temples to their fertility gods. So the temples, one of the biggest examples of this would be in Ephesus. They had this big temple to Diana, and their version of Diana was very big into fertility. And these temples would have things like prostitutes, temple prostitutes, because engaging in sexual activity brought you closer to the gods. To which I'm here to say that is a very convenient form of worship right there. That, hey, all I have to do is go and engage in pleasure, and that means I'm close to the gods. This is also a time where drug use would be prevalent as well, because it was believed in the Greek culture that to be out of your mind is to be closer to the mind of the gods. And I'll tell you, reading their stories, it makes sense, because half the time Zeus acts like he's on meth, so I get it. But now, at this point, into this context, Paul comes on the scene, and God starts saving these people out of this paganism. And he has to address things like this in the church. So fast forward to today, and guess what? We may not have temples with prostitutes in them, but we're here again. We're living under the ideology of Rome, the pagan ideology of Rome. Virginity is no longer a prized possession, but virginity is a title of scorn. Monogamy is quickly being considered old-fashioned and outdated. Marriage proper is under attack from all sides. Homosexual marriage is attempting to destroy it in the Western world. Child marriage is destroying it in the Eastern world. The divorce rate is at or above, I haven't looked at it in a few years, it's probably above 50% at this point. And that's in the church as well. That's unacceptable. There are more domesticated partnerships, and they're valued higher than marriage. But what is a domesticated partnership? That means that you're willing to be with somebody, but you're not willing to take a vow, and you're not willing to be committed. Yeah, I like living with you until something better comes along. But we shouldn't be surprised at this, because Romans 1 details to us that not only will men be given over to their passions, but the women are going to be given over to their passions as well. And honestly, these days, I feel like I hear the women yell about it more than I do the men. So the fact is that the way that it's marketed now is that sexual gratification is marketed as the greatest thing that exists in the world. You know, other than whatever product they're selling. It supposedly shows true love. Any movie shows that when people fall in love on the first date, what do? They immediately go home and drop their clothes. And it's supposed to be the greatest thing that someone can strive for. So it's you've got to conquer that giant. You've got to lay that girl. That's the goal. But my question is that if that's so, then why are so many hypersexual people left so empty? And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a young man who loved the thrill of chasing women. When I asked him on the morality of his actions, he shrugged it off, said there's nothing wrong with it, and nothing wrong with him. And my response was, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Tell me what you really feel. The next day he approached me and he said, I have a different woman every week. And he even admitted, I try to find women with dad issues because they're easier. And he said, I'm getting sex twice a day. Why do I feel so alone? This is the position that debauchery leaves you in. Sex with no intimacy. In the Bible, sexual misconduct is called adultery. Obviously, God doesn't like it. He made it the 7th commandment. So what I want to do, which we'll probably get through one of them today, and then we'll do another one later on, or I may just put it online and never touch this ever again. But what I want to do is look at 2 types of adultery that are mentioned in the Bible, expound on those, and then tie them to a modern context and look at how sexual intimacy, notice I tie those words together, is supposed to look in the Christian life. And then we're never going to talk about this ever again. So first, we have physical adultery. Physical adultery. The second one that we'll talk about down the road, I'm going to call self-adultery, but this one is just physical adultery. And this is the act of engaging in sexual relations with someone who is not your spouse, which of course, anytime you bring that up, it raises the question of what if I'm unmarried? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about some unmarried sexual immorality, because it's a good time. Until modern times, across most, if not all cultures, especially your Middle Eastern cultures, virginity was, and still is, a prized possession. Women in the time of the patriarchs, that's our founding fathers here, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If women were not a virgin, they were considered too unclean for marriage. That's why you have when Judah goes unto the prostitute, and it was Tamar, and she's so bent on, you have to marry me to one of your sons. You have to marry me to one of them, because with not, she had no hope, because you had 2 choices if you weren't a virgin daughter. 1, live life as a prostitute. Try to make your money that way. Or 2, hope that you have a brother that will take care of you. Because in this day and time, if you weren't a virgin, you had nothing to offer as a wife. Now, of course, Christianity is going to come along and say, no, you have value. But at this culture, it was a big deal. So this makes Lot's offer to the men of Sodom that much more heinous. Old righteous Lot sure didn't show it, because he was willing to ruin the lives of his daughters just to satisfy the lusts of an evil city. See, the ramifications of that aren't, hey, I'll give you my virgin daughters and you can rape them and then whatever, we'll have some therapy, they'll get on with their lives. No. By doing that, he's destroyed their lives for the rest of time. Well, of course, though, Lot apparently was not a good teacher, because his daughters didn't know their value either, because they end up incesting the guy when he's drunk. So, who knows? Maybe they offered to go out to Sodom. Who knows? Throwing away their lives. But, so this is the objection I get, is that who cares if virginity was prized in the Old Testament? Because we live in a New Testament age. How often do you hear that? I don't read the Old Testament because it doesn't matter. We're a New Testament church. Well, look, God cares about the marriage bed being undefiled. So does he not care about what goes on before that? So if a marriage bed is defiled, I'm going to use an analogy here. Dirty sheets. We all put sheets on our bed, because if we don't, you're an animal and you're gross. And there's two ways to make dirty sheets. One is to soil them while you're lying in them. Everybody's done that. Everybody's been sick and been sick in their bed, had to change their sheets and Febreze it. We've all been there. The analogy here is you're laying in the marriage bed and you soil your own bed. That would be like adultery. The second way to soil your sheets in the marriage bed is to lay down in them dirty. You don't go out and work all day, get real sweaty, get real muddy, and get real nasty, and then just go belly flop on the bed. Your wife will kill you. You have to take a shower first. The example here is giving away that virginity. You're going to the marriage bed defiled. And a lot of people, I wasn't taught as a child how precious your virginity was. And nobody told me that it creates complications in your marriage if you don't enter in that way. Jude 7. There's only one chapter, so Jude verse 7. It paints this interesting picture of the New Testament definition of sexual purity. I'm going to read it. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they in the same way as these indulged in gross immorality and went after a strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. Jude is very verbose in the way he likes to write. But there's a word that he uses there that I like, gross immorality. And he uses that word to describe Sodom and Gomorrah. That word is this Greek word called ekporneo. And its definition is to be utterly unchaste and to give oneself up to fornication. Sodom was so sinful, we have a word that we use. It's called sodomy. The Greek ekporneo, you can hear, just listening to the word, how awful it is. So it means to be utterly unchaste and to give oneself up to fornication. Unchaste means that you're engaging in unmarried sexual affairs. It's the opposite of chastity. Fornication is defined in engaging in sexual affairs outside of marriage. And to take this even farther, this Greek word here is where we get our modern word, pornography, ekporneia. That should really tell us all that we need to know about it, about how debased it is. So Jude is talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, that not only was their sin that they were chasing after homosexuality, they were chasing after rampant, uncontrolled promiscuity. Forget marriage. Why should I commit if I don't have to? So it's clear that God, If you are age 14 or older, it is very clear that God built us as sexual creatures. The Song of Solomon is a clear attestation to that. Don't sing that song to your wife. She doesn't like it as much. Your neck is ivory towers. I could hang a bunch of shields on it. So, why would God put on these perceived stipulations? So God built us as sexual creatures, but then God says, no, you have to do it this way. God hates sexual immorality, but God honors the marriage bed. So God is saying you're a sexual creature, but you need to do it within these parameters. I don't like it this way, but I do like it this way. And ultimately, we're going to find because it's for the benefit of us. But to understand why adultery is wrong, first we have to understand why marriage is superior. So, marriage is a complex issue, but it is beneficial for, I'm just going to give 3 reasons. Number 1, loneliness is not good for man. In Genesis, God makes the entire world and everything in it, and everything is good. But the only time that God says something isn't good is when man is alone. I made this earth. I made this sea. I made this firmament thing. I made the stars. I made the sky. I made this man. Man doesn't have anybody. That's not good. When alone, man tends to lean towards sin. Me, I get in a lot less trouble when my wife is around because I have to behave. When faith is out of the house, something is more likely to be broken. But not only that, when they're alone, man tends to lean towards depression. There have been times where Faith and the kids, I remember Faith and the kids went out of town for a week and it was just me. I couldn't get off work, so I was at home by myself. I spent the first day cleaning house and making it look amazing. And then the second night, it was so quiet, and I just turned on the TV, and then I got bored with that, so I played some video games, and then I got bored with that. And about 9 o'clock, I was like, well, I guess I can just go to bed. So I went to bed early, and then by the time Wednesday came about, I was missing them. Then, of course, they got home, and they were loud, and it's like, why don't y'all just go on back? But whenever a man's alone, he tends towards depression. It's not good. God knew what he was saying. There are benefits to alone time, but also too much alone time leads to a bad state for men. That's why solitary confinement tends to drive people insane, because we're social creatures. We're not meant to be by ourselves for so long. Marriage cures the loneliness by giving you a partner for life. Faith is my best friend, bless her heart, and I never knew best friends could love each other so deeply and fight so deeply. Caleb and Morgan are just now learning that. Second, the second benefit of marriage, society benefits from marriage. Marriage has been so not only is marriage good because it cures the loneliness of man, it also elevates society. Marriage has been the backbone of society even before governments were installed. So if you look in the days of Genesis, people were not classified by nations. People were not classified by cities. They were classified by their families. Even nations, once they came into being, were classified by their chief patriarch. For example, the Israelites were descendant of Israel. People were called by the name of their family name. They were clans. I guess the Philistines were started by Phil. Yeah, you get the point. So a study from 2003 shows that married men, these are just benefits from a secular study that I read in 2003. Married men make 25% more money than single men. Probably because they have to afford to feed their kids. Two-parent families are 5 times less likely to live in poverty than single-parent families. Think about that. 5 times. Overall healthiness and quality of life are reported higher in married families, probably because their wife makes them go to the doctor regularly. I'm a testament to that. Mortality rates are only 2/3 as high among married men than single men, which that means that married men tend to live longer. Maybe that's God being funny. I don't know, but they just tend to live longer. So why is this a benefit for a society? And it's been beneficial to societies throughout all of history. 1, because governments collect more taxes from higher wage earners. The more money you make, the more money the government gets, the more rich that the nation can be. 2, men with families are more likely work than to be sedentary. That is to say that men, when left alone, can tend to be pretty lazy. Whenever Faith and the kids were out of town, I spent 1 day cleaning the house, and I spent the other 4 watching Netflix and playing video games. Not very productive. But then whenever you get a family and you have somebody relying on you, all of a sudden you get this motivation to work. 3rd, marriage incentivizes procreation. The U.S. is running into the same problem now that Japan has hit, where there's not enough babies being born to replace the people that are dying. The birth rate has fallen below the death rate, and any time that happens, there's an issue like what is in Japan, where they're saying, please send us some sort of workers. We don't even care where you're from. We'll make you a citizen because we don't have enough people to work the jobs and keep the economy going. If you go, for example, look at somewhere, let's just take a business, for example. You have a business with 100 employees, 50 of them quit one day, and you don't have a pool of 50 to replenish them. Guess what the business can't produce? It can't produce like it did with 100 people. Well, marriage incentivizes procreation. Married people, not always, but most of the time, tend to want to have a small version of themselves. So they do. And we've run into this now in America because marriage is being so devalued. Well, guess what? When marriage is devalued, people tend to not have children. Goes hand in hand. And also, it builds a small governmental structure inside the home. So not only do you have government on a huge level, on a national level, on a state level, on a county level, you have kind of a small government in your home with the father as the head and the high priest of his home. Mom's right there under him. Then you have your kids. So they kind of learn what authority is like, and they're not little chaotic hellions. You got to beat that out of them. Third, the third reason why marriage is beneficial, is that marriage is the fast track to sanctification. We talked about bullet trains. Man, you want to get sanctified? Get married. Nothing will chip away your faults more than a marriage. Living with another human being in close intimacy every day for the rest of your life does a few things for you. It chips away your imperfections. So there's things like laziness where that starts getting whittled away. and getting smoothed out, because your wife's not going to let you just sit around as long as she's a good wife. Things that you used to do, habits you used to have, some of those are going to change to become new habits and new things, because it is going to chip away your imperfections. Not only that, marriage is going to mature you, because no one wants to be married to a kid. You will mature in marriage, and you will mature each other. Not only that, marriage teaches you compromise. That's a hard lesson that I have had to learn throughout the years, and still not the best at it, but I did learn to like Taco Bell. That is a compromise we had to make very early, and by compromise, I mean I lost. So I had to learn to like the Taco Bell. Not only that, marriage teaches you humility. It teaches you how to eat crow, because at some point in time, he's going to be wrong, she's going to be wrong. And for the sake of the friendship and the intimacy, you got to learn to eat that bird. But not only that, these all sound kind of negative. Marriage teaches you how to love. That comes with the maturity, and that marriage, when now people try to make marriage look like it is just this, you're in love and the love is all you need, and the love holds it together, and all this mess. I found that that's phooey, that marriage is work, and it is more than a full-time job. But the thing is that are you willing to work for it? And one of the things marriage teaches you is to love. And it teaches you this intimacy that obviously God created us for. So marriage is beneficial, and it is a straight up fast track to sanctification, because God uses marriage to get you where you need to go. But marriage isn't just for practical purposes. I don't want you to think that all these benefits from society and things like that speaks that marriage is for practical purposes. I'm not even going to touch that it's better to marry than to burn. We're not even going to hit that. But marriage isn't just practical. It also has spiritual implications. Ephesians 5:22-23 shows that. I won't read it for the sake of time. But it details the image that marriage conveys, that Christ and the church. Christ is the groom, the church is the bride, and I'm not going to go into a huge discussion of that, because that is a massive lesson in itself. But I like what Vodi Balcom said. He said that divorce should not be so common amongst real Christians. People will fight you over that. But stand by it. Divorce should not be common amongst Christians, because I love the way he worded this. We are people of reconciliation, not people of division. We don't divide people, we reconcile. Because we were once divided, and Christ reconciled us. How crazy is it that just by loving Christ, you can travel to most anywhere in the world and eventually find other people that love Christ, that look different from you, talk different from you, think different from you, but you're united by one carpenter that died 2,000 years ago. That's wild. That's wild. The woman is dictated to behave as the church does towards Christ. How is that? She desires to spend time with him. The church desires to spend it. We're going to go out here. We're going to have our church service. And our desire, I hope, is that the Holy Spirit fills that place so thick that we choke on him. Because we desire to spend time with God. When we're at home, in our prayer time, we desire for God to meet with us. We're not going through rituals to get something. We just want him. Not only that, The woman is to be appreciative of the sacrifice, just like the church is to Christ. That the woman is appreciative of the man going to work and making money. That the woman is appreciative of the things that he gives up for her and the kids. Not only that, the church shows love to Christ, just as the woman, the wife, shows love to the husband. But the man, he is dictated to behave as Christ does towards the church, in that he provides for it. Just like Christ provides for the church, men provide for their wives. Here's a big one: nourishes it spiritually. As the high priest of your house, we as men have the responsibility to nourish the spirituality of our homes. Unfortunately, that is often neglected, so just don't neglect it. And also show love. The man shows love as well. This is a super oversimplification, but it does illustrate the point that marriage is not just physically showing, but it also has spiritual implications. There's only one point left. I won't go through it, but just know that marriage affects you three ways. It affects you physically, it affects you mentally, it affects you spiritually. We may talk about that the next time that we do this, because adultery destroys each of those areas. Be that physical adultery, in that we're cheating on our spouse, or be that premarital adultery where we are cheating on ourselves. So let's pray.